Hello, my name is Desmond Carter, 28 years old. I am the owner of a small coffee shop called Memory Lane in Kearney, Nebraska, a tiny town nestled among endless cornfields where the vast blue sky seems to swallow all sorrows. Kearney isn't anything special, just a few quiet streets, an old-fashioned grocery store, and folks so familiar with each other that I can guess their orders the moment they step into my shop. But for me, this is the place where I found myself after years of being lost within the very family I once called home. Today is a crisp autumn day, the air carrying the scent of dry leaves and a hint of Nebraska's earthy essence. I'm sitting in a cozy corner of my shop at a worn wooden table by the window, looking out at a road where a few corn-laden trucks rumble by. In my hand is a steaming cup of black coffee, and in front of me is an old, dusty box of photos. I dragged it out from the storage room after cleaning this morning, inexplicably drawn to revisit memories I had once tried to bury. I lift the lid of the box and the smell of old paper and time hits me. The photos are a jumble, some yellowed, some stuck together from humidity. I flip through them one by one as if turning the pages of my own life. One photo shows me at 5 years old standing next to my sister Abby, both of us wearing identical red sweaters, grinning ear to ear in front of a Christmas tree. Another captures my parents, Gregory and Karen Carter, dressed impeccably in a suit and dress, their eyes stern as if playing the part of a perfect family in a commercial. And then I pause. My fingers tremble as they touch a small, frayed photo. It's of my grandmother, Edith Carter, and me, taken in front of my Uncle Walter's house on the outskirts of Kearney. She's wearing a dark green sweater, her silver hair neatly pinned up, her cloudy eyes still sparkling with a touch of warmth. I, probably 16 or 17 at the time, stand beside her, holding her hand, my smile strained as if hiding something. That photo cuts through me like a sharp, unexpected knife, slicing across my thoughts. Memories flood back unbidden like a torrent breaching the walls I've built around my heart. I see my grandmother's bewildered eyes again, her trembling hand clutching mine at the airport years ago. I hear her calling my name, her frail voice filled with love amidst the clamor of the crowd. And I see myself, an 18-year-old kid standing at a crossroads of choices, unsure of what I was doing, only knowing I couldn't leave her alone. I take a sip of coffee, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. Setting the photo down, I pull an old notebook from my jacket pocket and open it to a blank page. I'm no writer, nor am I good at storytelling, but today, I want to write this story down. Not to blame, not to resent, but to remember what saved me, what transformed me from a scared kid, caught between duty and rebellion, into the man I am today. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, about a 3-hour drive from Kearney. Lincoln is bigger, more modern, but still carries the dullness of a small city where people live by unspoken rules. Our house was in the suburbs, a 2-story white-painted home with a wooden fence and a meticulously trimmed lawn. My father, Gregory Carter, was a financial officer, always in a crisp suit, speaking slowly but sharply, as if every word was calculated. He loved recounting his struggles, how he rose from nothing to afford this house, a new car, and a proper family. My mother, Karen, was a nurse, always busy with shifts, but when home, she rarely smiled. She was a perfectionist, from the way she folded napkins on the dining table to how Abby and I were expected to behave to avoid embarrassing the family. Abby, my sister, 3 years younger than me, was a gentle, shy girl, always trying to please everyone but easily hurt. Abby and I were close, but there was an invisible distance between us, as if we were both afraid to voice what we truly thought. From the outside, our family was a picture of perfection. Abby and I excelled in school, always at the top of our classes, praised by teachers. Our parents attended every parent-teacher meeting, flashing polite smiles and boasting about our achievements. But inside, our home was cold, like a museum where everything was arranged for display, not for living. My father often spoke of filial piety, how children should be grateful and live up to their parents' sacrifices. Yet when his own mother called for help, he'd find ways to brush her off. He'd end those calls with a tone of irritation. I noticed, but I didn't dare ask. I was only 14 or 15. What did I know beyond obeying my parents? My grandmother, Edith Carter, and my grandfather lived on a small farm a few dozen miles from Lincoln, where fields of wheat and corn stretched to the horizon. They were simple, hard-working farmers, living modestly but with abundant love. I remember the summers I spent at their farm, where my grandfather taught me how to plant seeds, and my grandmother baked butter cookies and shared stories from her days as an elementary school teacher. She had a gentle voice, as if every word carried a bit of sunshine. She loved me the most, she always said, and I believed her. Every time she hugged me, I felt sheltered, as if nothing in the world could harm me. But then my grandfather passed away suddenly from a heart attack when I was 14. I still remember that day. The sky was gray, a light drizzle falling. My grandmother sat silently in the living room, clutching his framed photo, her eyes red but tearless. From then on, she began to change. She forgot to cook, forgot my name, calling me Billy, the name of an old high school friend of hers. Sometimes she stood at the door, staring down the road leading to the farm, as if waiting for my grandfather to return. It broke my heart, but all I could do was hold her hand and say silly things to make her smile. My father said she had Alzheimer's. He spoke calmly, as if it were just a fact of life, but I saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "She's old, it's inevitable," he said, then turned away as if it had nothing to do with him. I began to realize that filial piety in his eyes was just empty words, not actions. My mother said nothing, only sighed whenever my grandmother called. I, a 15-year-old kid, just kept my head down, trying to be the good son my parents expected. But inside, I felt a crack forming, small at first, but growing wider each time I saw my grandmother's face on a phone screen. When I was 16, during Thanksgiving, my family drove to my grandmother's farm, a little over an hour from Lincoln. The road was dusty, flanked by parched cornfields, with a few cows grazing under the pale sunlight. I sat in the back seat next to Abby, staring out the window, trying not to think about how my parents had been arguing all week about what to do with Grandma. When we arrived, Grandma was standing on the porch wearing her familiar dark green sweater, her silver hair disheveled, her cloudy eyes gazing at us as if unsure who she was waiting for. I ran to hug her, the faint scent of butter cookies on her sweater reminding me of peaceful summer days. "Desmond, you've grown so tall," she said, her voice trembling but her smile still warm like autumn sunshine. I smiled back, holding her hand as I led her inside, trying to hide the lump in my throat. That Thanksgiving dinner was livelier than usual. Besides my family, there was Uncle Richard, my dad's younger brother, and his family from Omaha. Uncle Richard, a few years younger than Dad, looked older with his salt and pepper hair and weathered face. He worked for a construction company, always boasting about big projects, though I overheard Dad say he was drowning in debt. Richard's wife, Aunt Linda, was a sharp woman, always in tight dresses, speaking in a high-pitched voice that drowned out everyone else. Their two kids, a few years older than me, ignored Abby and me, glued to their gaming devices. The meal started awkwardly. Dad and Uncle Richard sat at opposite ends of the table, exchanging small talk about the weather and football. Mom busied herself arranging plates, occasionally glancing at Grandma, who sat quietly, picking at a spoonful of mashed potatoes before setting it down, as if forgetting what she was doing. I sat next to her, trying to make conversation, asking about the cornfields, but she only smiled vaguely, calling me Billy again. I didn't correct her, just held her hand under the table, feeling her frail, cold fingers. Then the argument began, not loud, but sharp like a well-honed blade. Uncle Richard, after a few glasses of wine, spoke first. "Mom, I think you should sell the farm. It's not safe living alone like this." His tone was gentle, but I saw his eyes flicker toward Dad, testing the waters. Dad set down his knife and fork, smirking. "Richard, if Mom sells the farm, are you going to take care of her?" Uncle Richard froze, unable to respond. Mom, sitting beside Dad, nodded slightly as if agreeing with his question. The conversation between Dad and Uncle Richard grew tense. Neither wanted the responsibility of caring for Grandma. Then Grandma, silent throughout the meal, suddenly looked up, her cloudy eyes scanning the table. "Stop arguing," she said, her voice slow but firm. "Whoever takes care of me gets everything. The land, the house, the savings, the insurance, all of it." The room went still. Dad froze, his wine glass suspended midair. Uncle Richard frowned, while Aunt Linda's eyes widened, as if she'd just spotted a gold mine. I sat there, not fully grasping the weight of her words, but I felt the shift in the air, like a bomb had been placed on the table waiting to explode. Dad broke the silence. "Mom, I'll take care of you," he said firmly. "I'm the eldest. You should stay with us." Uncle Richard protested, claiming Grandma would be better off with him in Omaha because of better hospitals. The argument flipped like a scene from a play. Just moments ago, they were dodging responsibility. Now, spurred by Grandma's words, they were vying to take her in. I gripped Grandma's hand, feeling her tremble slightly. But she said nothing more, staring into the distance as if in a place none of us could reach. In the end, Dad won, being the eldest and with Mom being a nurse who could care for the elderly. Uncle Richard reluctantly agreed to let Dad take Grandma. A week after that Thanksgiving dinner, Grandma moved in with us in Lincoln, bringing a few suitcases of clothes, a framed photo of Grandpa, and memories that were slowly slipping away. For the first 2 years, things seemed fine. My parents treated Grandma like an honored guest. Mom took her to doctor's appointments, bought her medication, and even taped a detailed medication schedule to the fridge. Dad occasionally took her for walks in the park, bought her a new sweater, and bragged to neighbors about how filial he was. Abby and I were encouraged to talk to her, read to her, or watch her favorite old TV shows with her. I saw her smile more, though her smiles often came with a distant look as if she were trying to recall something important. But then things began to change. One evening, I overheard my parents arguing in the living room. Dad was asking Mom about Grandma's property deeds, her bank account, the savings she'd mentioned. Mom said Grandma couldn't remember, that whenever she asked, Grandma only shook her head or rambled about Grandpa. "She's not that confused," Dad snapped, his voice low but sharp. "She's hiding it, I'm sure." Mom sighed, telling him to calm down, that they'd figure it out. One day, Mom brought a psychologist to the house, a middle-aged man with thick glasses and a honeyed voice. He sat beside Grandma, asking about the farm, the deeds, the money. But she only shook her head, muttering disjointed sentences. Dad stood at the door, arms crossed, his face dark. From then on, my parents' attitude toward Grandma shifted, slowly but noticeably. Mom started complaining that Grandma dirtied the house, spilled coffee on the rug, or forgot to turn off the gas stove. Dad scolded her in front of guests, saying things like, "Mom, sit still, don't bother everyone." Grandma stayed silent, her cloudy eyes fixed on the floor as if she knew she was becoming a burden. Once I saw her sitting alone in an armchair, folding and refolding a napkin, her trembling hands searching for something to hold on to. I wanted to run to her, to hug her. But Mom pulled me back, saying, "Don't indulge her too much, you have to study." I started feeling suffocated in my own home. Abby felt it too. She'd hide in her room, writing in her diary or listening to music, trying to block out the arguments. I wanted to say something, to tell my parents to stop, but every time I tried, I remembered Dad's stern gaze, Mom's look that said I was just a kid who didn't understand. I was 17, in my final year of high school, and the pressure of college entrance exams kept me from confronting them. But every time I looked at Grandma, my heart felt like it was being squeezed. One memory still haunts me. It was a stormy night, thunder rumbling outside. I was doing homework in my room when I heard Mom shout from the living room, "She's gone, it's pouring outside." I ran downstairs to find Mom at the door, holding an umbrella but soaked through. Dad was on the phone, his voice panicked. Grandma was missing. No one knew when she'd left, only that she'd slipped out the back door without an umbrella or shoes, clutching Grandpa's framed photo. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my old bike, threw on a raincoat, and pedaled into the storm. Rain stung my face, cold and relentless, but I didn't stop. I rode through every street, knocking on neighbors' doors, but no one had seen her. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from anger. Anger at my parents for letting it come to this, anger at myself for not acting sooner. After nearly an hour in the rain, I found her. She was huddled under an old oak tree at the end of a road, soaked to the bone, clutching Grandpa's photo to her chest. "Grandma!" I called, my voice breaking. She looked up, her cloudy eyes meeting mine, and smiled. "Billy, you're back?" she whispered. I knelt beside her, hugging her, my tears mixing with the rain. At that moment, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I took off my raincoat and draped it over her shoulders, though it did little to shield her from the cold seeping through her thin clothes. "Let's go home, Grandma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though a fire burned inside me. The ride back felt endless. I glanced at her, her silver hair plastered to her forehead, her cloudy eyes fixed on the ground as if searching for something long lost. "Are you cold, Grandma?" I asked, knowing she might not answer. She shook her head slightly, whispering, "Billy, where's he gone?" I squeezed her hand, unable to respond, knowing Billy wasn't me, and Grandpa could never return. As we reached the yard, the yellow glow from the living room spilled out, illuminating the wet wooden fence. The front door was wide open, Mom standing there, arms crossed, hair disheveled, her eyes sharp. Dad stood behind her, phone still in hand, as if he'd just finished a call. Abby was huddled by the door, her eyes red, but when she saw me, she ran out and hugged me. "Desmond, you found her!" she whispered, her voice choked. I nodded, forcing a smile to reassure her, but Mom's gaze froze me. "Edith, where did you go, making the whole house turn upside down?" Mom said, stepping toward Grandma. Her tone wasn't worried but angry, as if Grandma were a naughty child troubling the family. Grandma stood trembling, rainwater dripping from her clothes onto the wooden floor, but Mom didn't seem to care. "Do you know how worried we were? Wandering around in this rain, what were you thinking?" Mom's voice rose, drowning out the sound of the rain outside. My blood boiled. "Mom, Grandma's freezing, let me take her to change," I said, trying to stay calm, guiding Grandma past her. But Mom blocked me, grabbing Grandma's arm, not gently. "Desmond, stop, I'm talking to her." Grandma looked up, her eyes confused, as if she didn't know where she was. "Karen, I was just looking for George," she mumbled, referring to Grandpa. Mom exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Edith, George is gone. Have you forgotten that too? This is unbearable." I couldn't hold back. "Mom, enough!" I stepped in front of Grandma. "She's soaked. She's shaking, can't you see? She didn't mean to get lost. She's sick." My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a mix of helplessness and fury. I'd never spoken to Mom like that. Never dared defy her. But seeing Grandma trembling, clutching Grandpa's photo like a treasure, I couldn't stay quiet. Dad, who'd been silent, stepped forward, his eyes like ice. "Desmond, you dare speak to your mother like that?" His voice was low but cutting. "Who do you think you are, raising your voice in this house? Do you know we've been running around because of her? Your mom had to skip her shift. I had to call the police. Do you know how much trouble this is?" He stepped closer, pointing at me, as if I were the one causing the problem. "You're just a kid. You don't understand this burden. Don't stand there preaching." I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. "Burden?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "She's Grandma, not a burden. If you think she's such a hassle, why did you agree to take her in? Why not let her stay at the farm where she was happy?" The words spilled out, and I knew I'd crossed a line. Mom froze, her eyes wide, then turned away as if avoiding me. Dad was different. He stepped closer, so close I could feel his hot breath. "What do you know, Desmond? You're just a kid living off our money, studying because of us. You have no right to talk like that in this house." I wanted to scream, to say I didn't need their money, that I just wanted Grandma treated like a person, not a liability. But I couldn't speak. Abby tugged my arm, whispering, "Desmond, stop." Her voice trembled, begging me not to make things worse. I looked at her, then at Grandma, still standing there, shivering, her eyes lost, and I felt trapped in a nightmare. I guided Grandma upstairs, ignoring my parents' glares. In her room, I dried her hair with a towel, helped her change into dry clothes, and tucked a blanket around her. She held my hand, whispering, "Billy, you're so good to me." I smiled, though tears welled up. "I'm Desmond, Grandma," I said softly, but she just smiled, her eyes distant. I sat beside her, listening to the rain subside outside, and told myself, I have to do something. I can't let her live like this. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My parents' argument echoed from the living room. Mom blaming Dad for not being strict with me, Dad blaming Mom for not watching Grandma. I covered my ears, but their words cut through like knives in my chest. I thought of Grandma, her eyes when she called me Billy, and the days ahead when things could get worse. I didn't know what I'd do, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let Grandma keep suffering. The weeks that followed felt heavy, like a storm brewing in our house. My parents no longer hid their frustration with Grandma. Every time she spilled a glass of water or forgot someone's name, Mom would sigh and mutter about how we can't keep living like this. Dad was worse. He began controlling her more tightly, what she ate, when she could go outside. Once I saw him lock her bedroom door from the outside, claiming it was for her safety. I stood in front of that door, fists clenched, wanting to break it down, but I turned away, powerless. Abby, my sister, withdrew even further. She spoke less, often hiding in her room with headphones on, as if trying to escape our home. I started noticing unsettling signs. My parents would whisper late at night, thinking Abby and I were asleep. I caught fragments of words like long-term solution, nursing home, or no point keeping her here. One night I eavesdropped outside the living room and heard Mom say to Dad, "If she can't remember where the property deeds are, there's no use keeping her here. We've done our best, Greg." Dad's voice dropped, cold and calculated. "I'll figure something out, but we need to make sure no one calls us unfilial." I crept back to my room, heart pounding, feeling like I'd uncovered a terrible secret. They didn't just see Grandma as a burden. They were planning to remove her from their lives. Their chance to act came sooner than I expected. My parents announced we were going on a family trip to Africa, a safari Dad had long planned to show off to friends and colleagues. "We all need a break," he said at dinner, his enthusiasm forced. "Africa, safaris, elephants, lions, it'll be an amazing experience for you kids." Abby nodded, but I saw sadness in her eyes, as if she knew this trip wasn't about family bonding. I glanced at Grandma, sitting quietly at the end of the table, picking up a piece of potato and setting it down, her gaze distant. "What about Grandma?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dad looked at me, his smile stiffening. "She's coming, of course, we're a family." But I didn't believe him. Something in his tone and Mom's evasive glance made me uneasy. On the day of departure, we were up at dawn. I helped Grandma put on her familiar dark green sweater, guiding her to the car, noticing how tightly she clutched Grandpa's framed photo, as if it were her anchor to this world. The drive to the airport was long and silent. Abby sat beside me, headphones in, staring out the window. Dad drove while Mom checked plane tickets, muttering about the itinerary. Grandma sat in the back, her trembling hands stroking the photo frame, occasionally whispering, "George, where are we going?" I held her hand, forcing a smile, but a heavy weight pressed on my chest. At the airport, the bustle felt suffocating. Announcements blaring, people chattering, suitcases rolling. We lined up at security, my parents leading, Abby trailing behind. I guided Grandma, walking slowly so she wouldn't tire. She clutched Grandpa's photo, her steps unsteady, her eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for a familiar face. I held her hand tightly, smiling to reassure her, but the unease in my gut grew, like something terrible was about to happen. We passed through security. The staff scanned tickets and checked bags, and I noticed Mom glance at Grandma with a flicker of irritation. I gripped Grandma's hand tighter, leading her through the long hallway to the departure lounge. The lounge was packed, every seat taken by passengers with oversized suitcases. My parents found a quiet corner, set down their bags, and Mom began rechecking tickets. Abby sat, headphones on, eyes glued to her phone, shutting out the world. I helped Grandma settle into a chair near a window overlooking the tarmac. She still held Grandpa's photo, her fingers tracing his face, her gaze lost. "Stay here, Grandma, I'll get you some water," I said. The airport speaker crackled, a calm female voice announcing, "Flight BA247 to Johannesburg is now boarding. Passengers, please proceed to gate 12. Dad stood immediately, grabbing his suitcase. "Let's go, Desmond Abby," he ordered brusquely. Mom took Abby's hand, pulling her up, and I saw her glance at Grandma but say nothing. I turned to help Grandma stand, but Dad cut in. "Desmond, hurry up, she's fine there." I froze, looking from him to Grandma, still sitting, her eyes vaguely fixed on the window. "What about Grandma?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Worry about yourself," Mom snapped, her tone sharp, pulling me toward the gate. Abby followed, head down, silent. I looked back at Grandma, small and alone in the vast lounge, like a leaf in a storm. My heart clenched. What were they doing, leaving her there? With her memory, she wouldn't know where she was or how to get home. A horrifying thought hit me. They were abandoning her. The whispers at night, the evasive glances. It all made sense now. The airport shuttle bus waited below, doors open, passengers crowding aboard. My parents and Abby climbed on quickly. Mom waved me over. "Desmond, come on!" I stopped, my feet rooted to the ground. I couldn't board that bus, couldn't leave Grandma alone in this cold airport. "I'm not going," I said firmly, though my heart raced. Mom froze and Dad turned back, face red. "Desmond, you dare!" he shouted, but I was already running back to the lounge. Thankfully, Grandma was still there. I rushed to her, kneeling before her chair, grabbing her hands. "Grandma, it's me. I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice choking. She looked at me, smiling faintly. "Billy, I was so scared," she whispered. I hugged her, feeling her frail body tremble in my arms. We sat there as my family's plane took off, the roar of engines echoing through the glass. And I knew in that moment everything had changed. I had chosen Grandma, no matter the cost. Afterward, I didn't know what to do next. Should I take her back to my parents' house filled with painful memories and their criticism? No, I couldn't bring her back there. Then I remembered Grandma mentioning her younger brother, Walter, who lived in Kearney, Nebraska. She'd spoken of him warmly, like a rare piece of memory still intact. I pulled out my phone and searched for Walter's farm, Harmon's Farm, Kearney, Nebraska. Luckily, I found the farm's phone number. I dialed, my voice trembling, and an older man answered. "Walter Harmon here. Who's this?" I took a deep breath and explained everything. Grandma, the airport, my decision. He was silent for a moment, then said, his voice thick with emotion, "Bring her here. I'll take you both in." I bought 2 long-distance bus tickets from Lincoln to Kearney, the earliest leaving that evening. I guided Grandma onto the bus and we sat together, eating dry airport sandwiches and dozing against each other. When the bus stopped in Kearney at dawn, Walter, a weathered 70-year-old with kind eyes, was waiting at the station. He wore a faded checkered shirt, holding a small sign reading Edith and Desmond. Seeing Grandma, he ran to her, hugging her tightly, his eyes wet. "Edith, you had me so worried," he said, voice trembling. Grandma looked at him, smiling faintly. "Walter, when did you get so big?" she said. I stood there, watching them, warmth flooding my heart. This was family, I thought. Not empty words, but moments like this. Walter took us to his farm, a small wooden house nestled among cornfields. His wife, Mary, greeted us with warm cookies and tea. I recounted everything, from how my parents treated Grandma to my decision at the airport. Walter listened, nodding silently, his eyes full of empathy. "You did the right thing," he said, patting my shoulder. "From now on, she stays with us, and you too, if you want." A week at Walter's farm felt like a peaceful dream. something I never thought I'd find after the stifling days in Lincoln. The small wooden house sat amid cornfields surrounded by rich red soil and apple trees heavy with fruit. Each morning I woke in a tiny attic room, hearing birds chirping outside and smelling Mary's butter cookies wafting from the kitchen. Grandma, though her memory faltered, seemed to find some peace. She liked sitting on the porch in an old armchair, clutching Grandpa's photo, gazing at the fields with dreamy eyes. Sometimes she softly sang a folk song I didn't know, her trembling voice full of emotion as if recounting a story from long ago. I helped Walter at the market daily, loading apples and pumpkins onto his old truck and selling at Kearney's Main Street corner. The people here were kind, calling Walter by name and asking about Grandma with genuine care. "How's Edith doing?" an elderly flower vendor asked, her eyes warm. I smiled, saying she was okay, though she sometimes forgot names. Walter just patted my shoulder as if to say I didn't need to explain too much. Here, people accepted Grandma as she was, not as a burden. Evenings, we gathered around the dining table under the warm glow of an oil lamp. Mary shared stories of Walter's youth, how he drove corn across Nebraska, while he laughed, teasing her for getting details wrong. Grandma sat quietly, sometimes adding a fragmented story about Grandpa, about their days planting wheat on this land. I listened, feeling a connection I'd never had at home, a real bond not requiring perfection or the facade of an ideal family, but the peace wasn't without disruption. My phone buzzed incessantly soon after, messages from Mom, Dad, and Abby. I glanced at the screen, seeing dozens of notifications, but didn't open them right away. I knew they'd returned from Africa. Mom's first message sounded worried. "Desmond, where are you and Grandma? Why aren't you home? Call me now." But hours later, the tone shifted. "What do you think you're doing, Desmond? Do you know how worried we are? Bring her back now." Dad was harsher. "Desmond, you dare run away like this? You've humiliated us. If you don't come back, don't blame me." Abby's messages were fewer but cut deeper. "Mom and Dad are furious. Mom's been crying. Where are you? I'm worried about you and Grandma." I held the phone, fingers hovering over the screen, but didn't reply. Each message was a stab, reminding me of Lincoln, when I was just a kid bowing to my parents' will. But this time I wouldn't. They'd chosen to abandon Grandma, leaving her alone at the airport, not caring if she got lost forever. They'd turned her into an object, a burden, and I couldn't forgive that. I turned off my phone, stuffed it in my pocket, and went to help Mary with the dishes. "You okay, Desmond?" she asked, her kind eyes on me. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Mary, I just need time." That night I sat on the porch with Grandma under Nebraska's starry sky. She clutched Grandpa's photo, murmuring, "George, the boy's grown so fast, hasn't he?" I knew she meant me, though in her mind I was still Billy. I held her hand, feeling her frail fingers, and told myself, let them blame me. Let them be angry. But Grandma and I are never going back to that house. I looked out at the fields, silver under the moonlight, and felt a resolve I'd never known. I'd chosen my path, and wherever it led, I knew I wouldn't regret it. Walter stepped out, bringing me a mug of hot tea. "What are you thinking about, sitting here all quiet?" he asked, his voice warm. I told him about the messages, my parents' anger, the fleeting guilt I felt for Abby. He listened, then patted my shoulder. "You did what most wouldn't, Desmond. Don't let them shake you. Edith needs you, and you need a place to call home. This is your home." I nodded, eyes stinging. "Thank you for taking us in," I said, my voice hoarse. He smiled, pointing at the sky. "Look at those stars, so bright. Don't let the bad stuff dim your light." The days that followed at Walter's farm passed in a simple rhythm, as if time here flowed more slowly, allowing me to breathe and rediscover myself. I woke early to help Walter water the crops, weed the garden, and load crates of apples onto the truck for the market. Mary taught me how to make butter cookies, the kind Grandma used to bake when I was a child. "Edith made these better than me," Mary said with a laugh, winking, but I saw a trace of sadness in her eyes when she mentioned Grandma. Grandma spent most of her time on the porch clutching Grandpa's framed photo, sometimes murmuring fragmented stories about days long gone. Sometimes she called me Billy. Other times she got my name right, Desmond. And each time she did, it warmed my heart. Despite the peace here, I couldn't fully shake a lingering unease. My phone buzzed daily with increasingly harsh messages from my parents. "Desmond, you can't just run away like this. What are you doing with Grandma? Bring her back now," Mom wrote, her tone a mix of anger and panic. Dad was colder. "You think you can make decisions on your own? You're tearing this family apart." Abby's messages were fewer but cut deeper. "I miss you. Mom and Dad keep fighting. I don't know what to do." I read them but didn't reply. I didn't know what to say when every word from them reminded me of that moment at the airport, when they left Grandma alone in a sea of strangers. One afternoon, while I was helping Walter fix a wooden fence, he called me into the shed. "Desmond, come here a moment," he said, his voice low but serious. I wiped the sweat from my brow and followed him into the shed, filled with the scent of old wood and hay. He rummaged in a corner and pulled out a rusty metal box. Opening it, he handed me a thick, yellowed envelope. "This," he said, "is from Edith. She asked me to keep it after George passed." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside were property deeds for the farm, a savings book with numbers that stunned me, and a life insurance policy in Grandma's name. I looked at Walter, confused. "Grandma gave this to you?" I asked. He nodded, sitting on a wooden crate, his eyes distant. "She knew her memory wouldn't last. After George died, she gave it all to me, saying I'd know who to give it to when the time came. I think that time is now." I didn't know what to say. The envelope felt heavy, not just from the papers, but from their significance. Grandma, despite her fading memory, had planned for the future. For me, long ago. I thought of my parents, their questions about her papers, how their attitudes shifted when they realized she couldn't remember. They'd seen her as a burden, but she, in her haze, still thought of others. "Walter, you keep it," I said, pushing the envelope back. "I don't need it," but he shook his head, smiling faintly. "Desmond, your grandma wanted you to have it, not for the money, but because she trusts you." That night I lay in bed with the envelope on the bedside table, but I didn't open it again. I thought of Grandma, of the days ahead, and vowed to care for her. Not for the papers or money, but because she was family, the only true family I felt connected to. I wanted her to live her final days in peace, not in blame or abandonment. A few days later, Grandma was unusually lucid. She called me to her room, her voice clear for once. "Desmond, sit with me," she said, pointing to the chair by her bed. I sat, holding her hand, feeling her frail but warm fingers. "I don't remember everything," she said, her eyes clearer than usual. "But I know you're a good person. You didn't abandon me." I smiled, fighting back tears. "I'll never abandon you," I said, my voice hoarse. She nodded and told me to call someone. "Lawyer Thompson in town," she said, her voice slow but firm. "I want to see him." Surprised, I complied. Mr. Thompson, an elderly man with white hair and round glasses, arrived that afternoon. In Walter's small living room, under the glow of an oil lamp, Grandma clearly stated she wanted to transfer all her assets, the farm, savings, insurance, to me. "He takes care of me," she said, looking at Thompson, then at me. "I want him to have it all." I was stunned, wanting to protest, but Walter placed a hand on my shoulder, shaking his head gently, signaling this was her wish. Thompson took careful notes, prepared the paperwork, and promised to finalize everything in a few days. As he left, Grandma held my hand, whispering, "I don't have much time left, Desmond. But I'm at peace because of you." I hugged her, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I knew this wasn't just about assets. It was a quiet passing of love, of trust, from her to me. Over the next few months, I balanced work and study. I enrolled part-time at a community college in Kearney, taking classes in agriculture and business management. During the day, I helped Walter at the market selling apples and pumpkins, learning to keep accounts. At night, I cared for Grandma. I changed her diapers when she could no longer manage, read her old books she'd once read to me as a child. Once, while reading The Wind in the Willows, she smiled and murmured, "George loved this one." I paused, looking at her, realizing that even as her memory faded, fragments of Grandpa remained, like precious gems in her soul. She started recalling small things. One afternoon, she taught me how to make butter cookies, though her trembling hands spilled flour on the table. "Roll the dough thin, Desmond," she said, her tone serious, like the teacher she once was. I laughed, following her instructions, though the cookies came out slightly burnt. She took a bite, closed her eyes, and said, "Just like mine." Those fleeting moments were my treasures. One day, she asked me to take a photo of her with my college acceptance letter. "Keep this one," she said, her voice weak but firm, "so you'll remember I'm proud of you." I had Mary take the picture. In it, I stood beside her, smiling, while she looked at me with bright eyes, as if trying to etch the moment into her memory before it slipped away. But Grandma's health was fading. She slept more, spoke less, and her lucid moments grew rare. I knew her time was short, but I didn't want to dwell on it. I just wanted to be with her, care for her, and hold on to the fragments of memory she had left. 2 years passed, and I continued my studies at the community college, balancing agriculture assignments with long days helping Walter at the market. But my heart was always with Grandma. Every morning I checked to see if she'd slept well, if she needed her diaper changed or her medication on time. Grandma rarely spoke anymore. She sat in her wheelchair, her cloudy eyes gazing out at the cornfields as if searching for Grandpa in the breeze rustling through. Once I wheeled her out to the yard to feel the warm spring sunshine. She held my hand, saying nothing, but her gentle squeeze told me she knew I was there. Those small moments were my strength to carry on. I stopped caring about the messages from my parents. Their blame and threats now felt like a passing breeze. Abby still texted, though less often, with short questions. "Are you okay? How's Grandma?" I replied briefly, knowing she was caught between our parents and me. My graduation day arrived, a milestone I never thought I'd reach back in Lincoln. I stood before the mirror in my attic room, wearing my cap and gown, feeling both proud and hollow. I'd done it, graduated community college with decent grades, enough to dream of a stable future, perhaps managing the farm or starting a small business. But the joy wasn't complete, knowing Grandma's time was short. That day, I wheeled Grandma to the campus where the ceremony took place under Nebraska's radiant sun. She wore her familiar dark green sweater, her cloudy eyes softening with a faint smile as she saw me in my gown. "Desmond," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I knelt, holding her hand. "Grandma, I did it," I said, keeping my voice steady. She nodded, her smile widening as if she understood, if only for a moment. I asked a nearby student to take a photo of us. In it, I stood behind her wheelchair, hands on her shoulders, smiling, while she looked at the camera, her eyes briefly bright, as if trying to hold on to the moment. I kept that photo in my wallet, a reminder that she was with me, even in her silence. The ceremony passed quickly. Applause, laughter, caps tossed into the air. Walter and Mary were there, hugging me, saying Grandpa and Grandma would be proud. But as I looked at Grandma, small and fragile, I just wanted to take her home to rest. A week later, Grandma passed away. It was a quiet morning, with early sunlight filtering through the window, illuminating her face. I went to check on her as usual, but when I touched her hand, I knew. She lay in bed, eyes closed, her face peaceful, as if she'd found Grandpa in her final dream. Grandpa's framed photo was still beside her, clutched tightly even in her last moments. I sat down, held her hand, and cried. Not loud sobs, but silent tears, streaming like a river carrying both joy and pain. I'd kept my promise. She was never alone. I called Walter and Mary. They entered quietly, standing by the bed, eyes red. "She went peacefully," Mary said, her voice choked. Walter placed a hand on my shoulder, saying nothing, but his touch told me he understood. We held Grandma's funeral at the farm, a simple ceremony with just me, Walter, Mary, and a few Kearney neighbors. I didn't invite my parents, not out of anger, but because they didn't belong here in Grandma's story. Abby sent a bouquet of white daisies with a note. "Desmond, I'm sorry. I hope Grandma rests in peace." I placed the flowers on her grave but didn't reply. I wasn't ready. The funeral took place under the old oak tree where Grandma used to sit and watch the fields. I stood by her small grave thinking of what she'd taught me. Not through words, but through how she lived, loved, and persevered despite her fading memory. I vowed to live in a way that honored her, worthy of the trust she'd placed in me. The days following the funeral felt like standing on the edge of two worlds. On one side was Kearney, where I'd found peace with Walter, Mary, and memories of Grandma. On the other was Lincoln, where I grew up, where my family, my parents, and Abby still lived, but now felt more distant than ever. I knew I had to return to Lincoln, not to reconcile, but to confront, to look my parents in the eye and understand what they felt when they learned Grandma had passed, when they realized I'd chosen her over them. I prepared for the trip like gearing up for a battle. I packed a few clothes, checked the photo of me and Grandma from graduation day, and tucked it carefully into my wallet. Walter saw me off at the bus station, his kind eyes tinged with worry. "You don't have to do this, Desmond," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But if you've made up your mind, stay strong like you always have. And remember, Kearney is always your home." I nodded, hugged him, and boarded the bus, feeling like I was stepping into a storm I wasn't sure I could weather. The 3-hour bus ride from Kearney to Lincoln felt like a lifetime. I stared out the window at the sprawling cornfields, dusty roads, and scattered houses. Each sight reminded me of Grandma, her sitting on the porch singing old songs or holding my hand calling me Billy with a dreamy smile. I wondered if my parents had ever truly loved her, or if it was all a performance to save face. When I stepped into the old house in Lincoln, everything seemed smaller than I remembered. The 2-story white house with its wooden fence and neatly trimmed lawn still stood, but it no longer felt like home. My parents sat in the living room looking worn and older than I expected. Dad, Gregory Carter, once a towering man with a sharp gaze, now appeared tired, his shoulders slightly hunched, hair streaked with gray. Mom, Karen, no longer maintained her usual perfectionism. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red as if she'd been crying for days. Abby was away at college in another city, not home that day. When I walked in, my parents looked at me, but neither spoke immediately. The air was heavy, as if the room were waiting for something to erupt. Finally, Mom broke the silence. "Desmond," she said, standing as if to hug me, but stopping short, her arms falling limp. Where have you been? Where's Grandma?" I looked at her, not angry or sad, just exhausted. "Grandma passed away 2 weeks ago," I said, my voice flat, as if speaking of a stranger. "She died in Kearney, where she was loved." Mom collapsed into a chair, covering her face, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't want this," she mumbled, her voice choked. I thought it was for the best." Dad sat silently, his gaze fixed on the floor, hands gripping the chair. I looked at him, waiting for an explanation, an apology, anything. But he said nothing, only sighed as if words were pointless. I told them everything about the bus ride, Walter's farm, Grandma's final days. I described how she smiled on my graduation day, how she held my hand, calling me a good person. I didn't accuse or raise my voice, just recounted, but each word felt like a blade, not to hurt them, but to make clear what they'd done. When I finished, Mom sobbed, muttering incoherent apologies. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it would come to this." Dad interrupted, his voice hoarse. "Enough, Karen." He looked up at me, and for the first time in my life I saw his eyes glisten. "You did what I couldn't," he said, his voice trembling. I was wrong." That was all he said, but it was enough for me to know he understood, even if only partially, the cost of his choices. I didn't stay long. I didn't want to hear more apologies or excuses. I just wanted them to know Grandma passed in peace, that she wasn't alone, and that I'd chosen my path. As I left, Mom grabbed my hand, whispering, "Desmond, you can come back anytime. This is still your home." I gave a faint smile, saying nothing. This wasn't home anymore. My home was in Kearney, among the cornfields, with Walter and Mary and the memories of Grandma. Back in Kearney, I began building a new life. I used part of Grandma's inheritance to pay for college tuition and the rest as capital to open a coffee shop near the community college. I named it Memory Lane, a way to keep Grandma close. The shop wasn't big, just a few wooden tables, a small counter, and walls decorated with old photos. Grandma standing in front of the farm, us together on graduation day, Walter grinning beside his apple-laden truck. Each time I looked at those photos, I felt her presence, smiling at me. The coffee shop quickly became a favorite for students and locals. They loved the smell of roasted coffee, the butter cookies I learned from Mary, and hearing me talk about Grandma. Though I only shared the happy parts, like how she taught me to bake or sang folk songs. I didn't mention the airport or the days in Lincoln. That story was mine alone, and I wasn't ready to share it. Every weekend I visited the local nursing home, bringing old books Grandma used to read. I sat with the elderly, reading to them, sharing stories about her, Grandpa, and summer days at the farm. They listened, sometimes laughed, sometimes held my hand, as if sensing the love in those stories. Once an elderly woman there said, "You're like my mother, always caring for others." I smiled, though my heart ached. I didn't know if I was like Grandma, but I knew I wanted to live in a way that honored her. One day Abby called. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Desmond, I'm sorry," she said. "I wasn't brave like you. I was scared of upsetting Mom and Dad, scared of doing the wrong thing." I listened, feeling more pity than blame. Abby was still young, trapped in the invisible cage our parents built. "It's okay, Abby," I said. "You'll find your own way. Take your time." She cried over the phone, and I promised we'd meet, but not in Lincoln, in Kearney, when she was ready. My story ends here, but it's not a sad ending. I learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who stand by you when the world turns its back. Grandma taught me that, not through words, but through how she lived, how she loved me even as her memory faded. I opened Memory Lane not just to make a living, but to keep those memories alive. Every time I read to an elderly person, every time I look out at the cornfields, I know Grandma is still there in my heart, guiding me. If you ask me if I have regrets, I'll say no. I chose her and she chose me. That's the most precious gift I have, and I'll carry it with me forever. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you good health and hope you'll spend more time with those you love.